Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good afternoon. A very Merry Christmas Eve to you and welcome to GB News. I'm Alastair Stewart. As the festive season gets into full swing, many will look back on what's been a torrid 2021, dominated by the coronavirus and with cases still rising. But, and it's a big but, might we just have turned the corner? The government will make some crucial calls in the next few days, based on scientific advice, based on data. Now, as sage modelers are accused of pessimism and some commentators of dangerous optimism, we'll try to get to the bottom of who's right and who's wrong, and we'll assess the odds of a much better 2022. But first, let's bring you right up to date with the news. Here's Karen Roberts.
Thank you, Alastair. This is your news at 5 o'clock. A further 122,186 lab-confirmed COVID cases have been recorded in the UK in the latest 24-hour period, marking a third consecutive record day. Elsewhere, figures from the Office for National Statistics show a record 1.7 million people were infected with COVID-19 last week. Amid a steep rise in cases, vaccination centres will be open even on Christmas Day. Staff and volunteers are giving vaccines today, tomorrow and on Boxing Day as part of a Jingle Jab campaign. In this year's Christmas message, Boris Johnson is urging people to come forward to get a COVID booster jab.
We know that things remain difficult, but for millions of families up and down the country, I hope and believe that this Christmas is and will be significantly better than the last in this vital respect, that we can celebrate together with those we love and raise our glasses to those who can't be with us.
The UK is set to offer 12-month visas to social care workers in an attempt to combat staff shortages due to coronavirus. The temporary measures will come into effect early next year and are expected to attract thousands of staff. To qualify, migrant workers will need to be paid a minimum annual salary of £20,480. Well, the Queen's Christmas Day message is expected to be particularly personal this year, as it's her first since the death of her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. A photograph released by Buckingham Palace ahead of her televised address to the nation tomorrow shows the Queen at Windsor Castle. Her Majesty is accompanied by a single framed photo of her diamond wedding anniversary in 2007. A Moscow court has fined Google nearly £74 million for failing to delete content Russian authorities deem illegal. It's the first time a fine of this kind has been imposed in the country. Russia has been increasing pressure on big tech this year. Critics say it's an attempt to exert tighter control over the internet, threatening to stifle individual and corporate freedom. The UK, EU and the US have received more doses of COVID-19 vaccines in the last 6 weeks than African countries have all year. New analysis from the People's Vaccine Alliance shows that Western nations received 513 million doses. Meanwhile, countries in Africa received just 500 million throughout the whole of 2021. A drug which could halve the risk of death from some prostate cancers could be made available on the NHS. A study published in The Lancet found hormone therapy, abiraterone, could be effective in reducing the death rate of patients from 15% to 7%. More than 52,000 men are diagnosed with prostate cancer in the UK every year. The most expensive ever telescope is blasting into space tomorrow, 100 times more sensitive than its predecessor, Hubble. The James Webb Space Telescope will be launched on Christmas Day after a delay due to the weather. Scientists hope that it will shed new light on the birth of the universe. That's your news update. I'll be back in half an hour with the latest headlines. Now let's return to Alistair.
Karen, thank you very much. The numbers affected by COVID, those in hospital and those sadly no longer with us, are easy. You just count them. Those facts have dominated the headlines, but now all eyes have turned to the prediction stuff and the decisions that politicians make based upon those predictions. Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have been much more cautious than England about what the future holds, but all focus their Christmas messages on the threat from COVID.
And though the time for buying presents is theoretically running out, there is still a wonderful thing you can give your family and the whole country. And that is to get that jab, whether it's your first or your second or your booster, so that next year's festivities are even better than this year's.
Vaccination is, above all else, a demonstration of compassion for and solidarity with each other. By continuing to show compassion and solidarity, I hope we can all enjoy the best and the safest festive period possible. And, of course, I hope above all else that we can all look forward to a much brighter and better new year.
A small army of people have sacrificed their Christmas plans to work in vaccine centres across the country to make sure we all have the protection we need against this awful virus. Their dedication and service means so much to us all. Thank you for everything you do.
But they've all made different decisions about when we start getting tough again or whether we do. Which of them is right? And why do those decisions, based on predictions, vary so wildly? Who to believe, if any of them? Journalist and author Ross Clark has been looking into whether we should trust the modelling or rely on real-world data instead to make those decisions. Ross, good to see you. I mean, to be frank, cast your mind back 23 months. Modelling and predicting has had a bad track record throughout this pandemic. Who's to blame?
Well, so a lot of the models we've had have produced predictions which can't actually be measured against real outcomes because, of course, you know, we locked down in March 2020. Therefore, you can't test the Neil Ferguson's prediction of 500,000 deaths in the event of us not locking down. But put it this way. Just look at what's happened over the past few weeks. We've had in the past few days 3 studies, British studies, which have shown that the Omicron variant produces a less severe form of illness than previous versions, and particularly than Delta. According to the UK Health Security Agency, it's between 50 and 70% less likely to put you in hospital. But we really knew that 2 weeks ago because the South African data was telling us that, and South Africa's been ahead of us in Omicron. But it seems so hard for SAGE to admit that this was a variant that was causing less severe illness. They kept sort of trying to dismiss that South African data, and what we got instead were these
the chief scientific officer, Sir Patrick Vallance himself, in the Times newspaper under the heading Thunderer, says they don't just look at the worst possible outcomes, they look across a full range. He also says the real danger is either side playing data games for political purposes.
Well, I think, I don't know what Sage get up to behind closed doors, but, if he thinks that what matters is what comes out to the public and how it seems to the public and how it seems to the government and ministers making decisions. And if Sir Patrick Vallance really thinks that they've made a balanced sort of view on this, well, I suggest he goes back and reads the paper number 48 that was produced by Imperial College last Friday, which gave us this sort of really severe prediction that we could have 4,000 to 6,000 deaths a day by January, far worse than the previous spike.
I completely accept that point. I completely accept that point, and I follow the Sage narrative with interest. But it takes me to my main point, and I've read the piece that you've written in both the Mail and the Telegraph. See, I think you're blaming the wrong person. I think you should be blaming the politicians who look at that database, look at those papers, and say we're going to go down that road, or Drakeford does, or Sturgeon does, whereas Johnson says we're going to go down that road. It's the politicians who make the call, not Sage.
Well, absolutely. Of course, the politicians make the call, but it is very important that Sage puts balanced information to them. And I haven't sat in on a cabinet meeting. I don't know exactly what they've said, but according to reports, the reason we're not in lockdown this week is because several cabinet ministers just had the confidence to challenge Sage, to ask them the right questions and to think, well, look, hang on, there's a wider story here. And, what about this South African data, which says it's not as serious as some of these sort of really, doom-laden scenarios that Sage were putting out. And I think if, it hadn't been... But, yeah, of course, politicians make the decisions and, to give Sage a credit, every time a Sage person is on the TV or on the radio, they make that point.
Absolutely. And, let me come to that point about the people who stood out in cabinet on one side or the other of the argument. Not one scientist amongst them. And I was talking to Liam Fox on another programme a couple of days ago here at GB News. And Liam, as you well know, is a medical doctor, former GP. And he said one of the real problems is that we don't have good scientific brains within government, ministers who can really interrogate what those boffins are telling them.
Well, I quite agree with that. And if we had more scientific brains in government over the past year, 18 months, 2 years now, we would have had better decisions made all the time because, nobody's an expert in everything. But, what you've got to do if you're in a position of power and influence, you've got to ask the right questions and, get them to explain what does that mean? What does that mean? Why is what you are saying so very different from what the South African Medical Research Council was saying 2 weeks ago? And, if we have ministers who capable of asking this question. Mrs. Thatcher would have been capable of asking the right questions through this, but our current crop of ministers is a bit light on scientists.
All right, Ross, always good to talk to you, and I recommend everybody reads what you've said about it in the Mail and the Telegraph, but I also recommend Patrick Vallance in the Times, so you can get a balanced view. Have a great Christmas and keep in touch with us. Thank you very much indeed, Ross Clark. The reference to Margaret Thatcher being that she was the last Prime Minister who did actually have a science degree. Now, before I leave you, I want to share something that is really special. By now, Santa is well and truly on his way across the globe, delivering millions of fabulous presents to those of us lucky enough to be on his good list. And I can now share with you Santa's live tracker, brought to us by North American's Aerospace Defense Command, who usually spend their days a little bit like Dr. Strangelove, defending North American skies. There it actually is, live from the United States of America. Now, just after 6:30 this evening, I will be speaking to Major General Eric Kenny from the Command Centre to get Santa's latest movements. But here is a sneak preview now, and you can see that Father Christmas is, I'm told, in my ear over Mumbai in India. Now, the reason that NORAD tracks Santa is a rather unusual one. It happened by accident back in 1955. A young child tried to reach Father Christmas on the phone and dialed a misprinted number from a department store ad, which actually put him through, by accident, to the Continental Air Defence Command Operations Centre. Well, from then on, NORAD has dutifully reported on Santa's location for children across the world, with around 24 million people following his journey every year. And across this evening, a team of volunteers will handle, wait for it, around 12,000 emails and more than 100,000 phone calls from more than 200 countries. And we have been given access to that special tracker system throughout the evening. So do stay with us and follow Father Christmas's journey. And once again, as I say, I'm delighted and indeed honoured to be joined by Major General Eric Kenny from the Command Centre just after 6:30. Coming up next, Gloria De Piero speaks to MPs from across the political spectrum to find out who they really are in her Christmas special. The Real Me has been a standout feature from GB News throughout the year. But first, here's your weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. Skies are clearing across Scotland during this Christmas Eve, and it's turning colder here, but cloudy elsewhere with some outbreaks of rain. One main area of rain associated with this weather front moves north during the rest of the day, and another front moves south, allowing colder air to move in across northern parts of the UK. So big contrasts in the weather from place to place and from day to day during the next few days. But the main themes overnight are that it will be cloudy across much of the UK with outbreaks of rain for Northern Ireland, Wales, northern and central England, as well as East Anglia. To the north of that, clear spells for Scotland and a widespread frost forming for the start of Christmas Day. But to the far southwest, rain turns up early Christmas morning. South Wales, southwest England seeing some heavy showers first thing, along with a brisk breeze. It's a mild start here, but after a cold start for Scotland, for northern and eastern England, it stays largely dry and bright here, but with a very cold wind, and that wind will be particularly strong over the higher ground of northern UK. Meanwhile, a lot of cloud elsewhere, outbreaks of rain steadily moving north, a miserable day to come for parts of Wales and the southwest. Mild again in the southwest, much colder further north across